Welcome to this explainer. Today we are diving into some seriously counterintuitive wisdom found in the book of Isaiah, specifically looking at chapter 30, verses 18 through 22. Now, if you've ever felt totally stuck waiting for clear direction, or maybe you felt like you need to have your entire life perfectly put together before you can even ask for grace, well, this analysis is going to be incredibly relevant for you. We're going to translate this ancient, profound text into a really practical framework for understanding grace, finding the courage to step out into the unknown, and finally, letting go of false security. As you'll see, this ancient text completely flips our standard expectations completely upside down. So think about this. What if the guidance you've been waiting for is actually waiting on you? I know, it sounds a bit backward. Most of us naturally desire a full map, right? We want the complete plan with every single turn marked clearly before we take that very first step. We crave that complete certainty. But what we're looking at in this text offers a radical alternative. It actually asks us to trust before we have the whole picture. It proposes a scenario where the clarity we are so desperately seeking literally only arrives after we make a move. Let's jump straight into section 1, the unexpected shift. To really get the power of what's happening here, we have to look at the structure of the chapter itself. Because everything before verse 18, it was heavy. I mean, unrelenting confrontation. And then, absolutely without transition, and without the people suddenly fixing all their mistakes, the entire tone pivots violently to pure compassion. The text just says, "The Lord longs to be gracious to you." It's such a wild, unexpected shift because, human logic says compassion comes after we apologize and clean up our act. But here, the compassion just arrives. Which brings us to section 2, the God who waits. We almost always feel like we are the ones endlessly waiting on divine timing, but the original language here reveals a massive reversal. The Hebrew word translated as longs or waits is kaka, and this is absolutely crucial. God isn't passively sitting back with his arms crossed while we figure it out. Kaka actually means to wait with eager expectation. It's an active leaning toward. It literally means God is actively waiting for the exact moment he can show compassion. There is real dynamic movement here. This verse beautifully illustrates a God who is already positioned toward you with mercy. Notice the action phrase. He will rise up to show you compassion. He isn't waiting around to punish or shame you for being slow. He is waiting to be gracious. The moment you make even the smallest turn or cry out, he rises to answer. The return doesn't have to be this big, elaborate thing. A cry, a simple turn. And the response? It's immediate. So the big takeaway here is that grace is not a reward for your self-improvement. The source material notes that human beings, especially those of us who have been through hard seasons of our own making, we find grace incredibly difficult to receive. Getting it without earning it first, it feels like walking through a door you simply don't deserve to be standing in front of. But the mercy described here doesn't begin when you finally arrived perfectly. It's waiting at the exact place you return to, just as patient as the moment you left. You don't have to earn it, you just have to accept it. All right, moving on to section 3. The voice from behind. Now this addresses the exact kind of guidance we usually miss because we're looking in the totally wrong direction. We are so used to wanting that turn-by-turn GPS route, mapping out the full future before we take a single step, but this promise flips that expectation entirely. God promises a voice from behind. It acts as a confirmation of the step you just took, not a sneak preview of the whole route. And this brilliantly illustrates that clarity grows as you walk. The kind of trust this text points toward requires a real willingness to be in motion before you have complete certainty. Now, to be clear, we're not talking about reckless motion here. We're talking about faithful motion, a step taken in trust. Step 1 is making that move. Step 2 is the voice from behind confirming it, saying yes or maybe gently redirecting you. Guidance arrives as a confirmation after you take a faithful step, not a preview before it. Obedience becomes the actual door that clarity walks through. To put this into perspective, the context here involves a time of deep, literal crisis. These were historical periods of siege where the people who carried wisdom were literally forced to hide in caves or underground. But the amazing promise is that even in the driest, most terrifying seasons, this gentle, confirming direction remains accessible. Even when everything else feels completely stripped away, your ability to take a step and receive confirmation, that remains. And that leads us perfectly into section 4, releasing false anchors. So what happens to our false sense of security when true clarity finally arrives? Because once you hear that voice and you know the true path, your relationship with the things you used to rely on changes dramatically. The imagery in verse 22 is kind of startling. The people take their most precious, sacred items, heavily adorned with expensive silver and gold, call them unclean, and decisively throw them out like trash, completely without nostalgia. To understand why this is such a big deal, you have to look at how idols functioned back in the ancient Near East. They were often these small figurines people carried in their pockets or took into battle for protection. The real danger wasn't the wood or the silver itself. It was that they were in Egypt in miniature. They were physical, false anchors that people desperately clung to. They were taking the place of God in their trust system, when what they actually needed was true faith. The beautiful thing about this passage is that the moment of throwing these false anchors away, it is not ambivalent. It's not a moment of sad sacrifice where you're dragging your feet. Because a false anchor absolutely cannot carry a true calling. The moment you clearly recognize what these idols actually are, letting them go becomes this massive, decisive gift of clarity rather than a loss. Once you experience the grace that's waiting for you and the voice that guides you, the things you used to trust in suddenly look completely inadequate. You throw them away because, for the first time, you finally see them clearly. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to look at your own life, right now, through the lens of this ancient wisdom. Ask yourself, what false anchor do you need to name today? Is there a way of seeing yourself, maybe a habit, a relationship, or an expectation that you have been trusting in way more than you should? You don't even have to completely release it right this second. Just be brave enough to name it. Notice what it's costing you to hold on to it. If guidance truly arrives as you walk, and if grace is literally already waiting for you, what's stopping you from opening your hands and taking that first step?